Good day, and again I say good day. Welcome to Last Thing I Think with me, your host, Monica Ray, where we discuss all things for the culture, for the kingdom. Why? Because although we're not of this world, we're still in it. So it's imperative that we maneuver through it wisely. Here we discuss all things from policy to prophecy. So buckle your seatbelt, get your snack. I don't have a snack today. But I do have water. I'm doing my best. Honor me now. Well, let's jump right into it because this is again another episode that's all encompassing of last thing I prayed about and last thing I thought about. So buckle up, get your snacks, and let's get started. My Lord, a lot has come out this week. The last thing that I prayed about / thought about is the interview on the Isaac Carree show with the, I think, executive CEO Norman. And the clips were very much so clickbaity for sure. And unlike the Nelk boys, I actually try to do my due diligence before I just run to assumptions. However, I did make videos prior to watching, thinking that after I watch this, I will have to retract my sentiment. I'm happy to say that that's not the case here. So let's get into it. If you did not watch it, essentially, Isaac Carree introduces Norman, and he just kind of tells us the background of how he got into working in gospel music. He is the brother-in-law of Travis Green, so that's kind of where he got his start. Then he starts to talk about how he manages to transition from Travis Green to Maverick City. And his observations aren't totally off, right? I believe his observations are accurate. I think the conclusion he came to from his observations are where you're going to find, in my opinion, some inaccuracies. Because the way in which he views the world is directly tied to his experiences. He is African, and gospel music was birthed from African American culture. Those nuances matter. He also is a staunch Trump supporter. So now when we talk about honoring gospel music, you don't consider the history and a way in which you can push the genre without diminishing it and disrespecting it because you can't relate. Now, let me be 1000. I can't relate to getting it out the mud. Okay. I was grateful. I am grateful that I grew up with two parents, upper middle class, houses, had tough times, of course, because that just comes with life. Things change and you fall, but you rebuild. I'm happy to say that I've always had a safe place to land. My mom has always had a safe place to land because we were afforded parents that provided that. So I can empathize with not necessarily knowing all the struggles that our gospel predecessors may have sung about. However, I understand that gospel music is not just about the lyrics, but the expression. So I want to get into some of the things that he stated in the interview and kind of give my feedback on some of that. The one thing that I believe he 1000% got right is his primary observation within the gospel music genre that needed some work was the infrastructure, right? Like there were too many managers and gospel artists were too busy booking church gigs while CCM artists were booking tours. And so again, that's an infrastructure issue that he observed and then presented to, at the time, his then client, Travis Green. But then my rebuttal is, knowing that, why can't we just bring that structure to gospel artists, right? Because a lot of these things that our CCM Christian artists have is also rooted in their ability to have access to resources. The access to resources to push that genre is different than in gospel. So instead of saying it's stale, let's just be real about the fact that there are resources afforded to one that aren't totally afforded and or presented to the other. Because again, one genre is focused on tours. Another is trying to feed their family by booking churches. We need access. We need structure. So there's that. He said twice on there, he's a staunch, Trump supporter, thanks Trump for PPP loans, actually thank Congress. He just signed it on the CARES Act, but what do I know? Because he himself is not intelligent enough to do that. But I think this is an important part we have to consider, because you are African and a Trump supporter, and your ability to be okay with that while saying that you love gospel music is contradictory. Here's why. Some of the same policies that you're voting for are the reasons why gospel music sounds as depressive as it does. You said you can't relate to that. Then why do you align with policies that perpetuate that within that community? Because the experiences of our ancestors and those who sing gospel isn't because they wanted to get it out the mud. The redlining did that. The segregation did that. The lack of resources did that. And despite all that, we still remain consistent with our Lord and Savior, because we know over time it will get better. And we are living testaments to that. And because I understand that, I didn't have to go through what my great grandparents went through, grandparents, even parents, because I didn't have to suffer like that. I now don't necessarily have to bash that expression, which brings me to the concept that I've presented several times. We think inclusion is erasure. Just because that's not my testimony doesn't mean that it doesn't have a place. Because gospel music is not just limited to the lyrics, it's also a sound. It's a sound, it's a tone, it's a way in which we express, which brings me to another thing that he stated. He said, y'all sing too hard. Nobody want to hear all them runs. You know who get it? White people get it. That was a statement later. Now, let me not conflate. He did say later on, those things didn't come together, but even the comparison, you know who gets it? Jews get it. White people get it. And I don't ever compare myself to a colonizer, respectfully. Because whatever they get, the way in which they get it, I'm not trying to sign up for, with all due respect. They're not my barometer for morality. Peep the history, ain't got nothing to do with me. He talked about gospel artists singing too hard. We don't want to hear all those runs. Couple of things here. In my mind, when you say that, paired with later on in your interview, you know who gets it? White people get it. And I understand sometimes every song doesn't have to be runs, because the goal is for the audience to engage. Totally fine. However, to assert that the runs in and of itself are the problem suggests a couple of things. That the African expression in and of itself is problematic. Why do I say that? Because in your interview, you said the goal was collaboration. I agree. And so when you brought Mav City together, they learned how to tone it down, and their ability to tone down with white writers, with their very ethnic presentation, mind you, because that mattered. They looked cool. Ain't finna hold you. If I didn't see Chandler, Naomi, Dante, and Lake, Aaron, please, who? But I needed that Chan, Naomi, and Dante. So that aesthetic really mattered. It also let Black people know that if you're not a runner, you could still be successful in this music industry, even though I also agree that everybody doesn't need to be an artist, please. But in your interview, you're perpetuating once again the ideology that in order to make it, you got to just tone down your Blackness. You know what white people aren't doing? Toning down. Why does the barometer for success always come at the expense of the African expression? Why is that the case? The reason you can't see that is because you're walking through the world as a Trump supporter. Go get the money, go get the money. And as an African. So you don't actually see gospel music for the heart and the root that it is. Because your ideals, your alignment suggests otherwise, because it's about the money. And you know what white people also aren't doing? Worrying about inclusion. Because the truth is, Maverick City is successful because, which I agree with, you brought all of these people together and toned down the skill so everyone's musical ears and musical needs could be met. That was adjustment on the Black kid side. It's always adjustment on our side. Why is that? You can't speak to that because you don't have lens for that. God showed you everything to do with going to Donald Trump and getting your PPP. He did not give you anything for racism. Once again, because no one ever has any revelation from the Lord about racists. We always have to overlook it. Always. God is always giving you guys the heart for the racists, not strategy to adjust it or change it. Very interesting. And so when you sit here and talk about people singing so hard, what you're complaining about is the expression. And because it doesn't work for white people and all people, then it's not profitable. And that's the hard pill to swallow. There might be some validity to that. But the question is, why does it matter if they don't get it? Because the bigger issue to me is the structure of gospel music. We know that works because the Kingdom Tour came right after, and all these gospel artists came together, selling out arenas, singing the same way they were singing, growling the same way they were growling. And a lot of the times when we make these comparisons, well, you know who gets it? White people. Do they get it? Or is it because they can't do it? Because let me tell you something, the white people that can sing do, they will run you up and down and round the corner. What's a girl named Yeba? The Madison? Any white woman who got it like that, who can sing for real, Jessie J sang, and they do it every opportunity they get. Every time they got an opportunity to open their mouth, that they're ooh, wow, ooh, wow, ooh, 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 wow, every time. And so the truth is, if they could, you sitting here saying, nobody want to hear all those runs. No, they do want to hear it. The problem is they can't do it. Because if they could, they would. That's why the change always comes at the expense of Black people. If we just tone it down a bit, we'll make it. And that was my overarching kind of concern about the interview, because once again, we're perpetuating Black people. You and your culture is too much. Do less. Then you'll make it. Come sign with us. That's crazy. Because the truth is, what if I can't do that? Then what? Now we're also creating a space where all the music sounds the same. The beauty of music is that I have the opportunity to pick. I want to hear, if he dresses the lilies with beauty and splendor, and G's can't work it out if you let him, G's can't. There's a space for all of it. Maybe if you took your structural observation and presented that collaborative spirit to the gospel music industry, we might be able to meet in the middle with that. Because picking at, attempting to dismantle, or poking at the sound, because I promise you, like I said before, if white people could do it, they would. I don't know a white person who has it and doesn't. Okay. Then we wouldn't be having this conversation. This is all about restructuring so that white people feel comfortable. And once they feel comfortable, we'll all make it. I'm beating a dead horse. One thing that he brought up that is 100% true is the power of collaboration, but also jealousy. 100%. I could see that just as a listener, right? Like people see in Maverick City and that sound and it not sounding like gospel, which is fair, but your response shouldn't be to hate on them. I didn't realize during the pandemic, because I wasn't on Clubhouse, I refused to open any more additional social medias. They were like picking at them and calling them names and doing all the things and making fun of them. And it's like, that's not necessary. Because one thing that Chandler and all of them did do is they opened up a lane, right, for people like myself. My tone, I love gospel music, but my tone lends itself to CCM. It just does. You can probably tell by the way that I talk, right? It just lends itself to that. And so with that understanding, it feels good to know that, hey, once again, we're not a monolith, right? We can check off all of these boxes like that matters, but it doesn't have to come at the degradation of another, right? Like Maverick City can exist as a CCM powerhouse, but it doesn't have to come at the degradation of gospel, because more than just lyrics, right? Because gospel has evolved even lyrically. It's the sound, it's the organs, it's the way in which we lay out our lyrics, it's the rhythm, it's the instruments that we use, right? It's all of those things that really matter. That presentation really speaks to who we are as a culture and our lived experience as African American Christians, our experience as African Americans in this country with God. And that's got to be honored. And so collaboration was one thing that I agreed with him about. And that's why Maverick was winning. And I do agree that there probably was some jealousy around that. But I just don't think that his observation led him to the accurate conclusion, because his lens is skewed due to his experiences being African, which is a different lived experience in this country than African American, and also the ideals of Donald Trump, that you can overlook racism and still get to the money, not realizing it's all cyclical, that racism in turn will impact everything you're trying to do. That when you're singing with people who are once again voting against the interests of those that look like you, that is a problem. But because you got money, you're not talking about me. Okay. But guess what? Your communities won't be safe if those people don't have their basic needs met. It's all cyclical. You want safe communities? You want your gates to remain safe? Make sure the surrounding areas don't become desperate. Why? Because desperate times lead to desperate measures. When people are desperate, danger is not even a thing, because you ain't got nothing to lose. And so that's why I'm an advocate for taking care of my neighbor. Doesn't mean we need to have equal, but you need to have access. You need to have opportunity. You need the ability to choose. Because if I don't give you a choice, right? If I take away your basic needs for safety, shelter, transportation, employment, now you're going to take desperate measures. And now I got to walk around in the world worried about, it's just not necessary. And so the last thing that I'm going to pray about as it relates to this topic is that we would find a way to unify the gospel music industry, starting with the infrastructure that we know that works without having to compromise the sound, because that's possible too. The introduction, right? At some point, we've got to force the white audience to adjust. At some point, they're going to have to pivot too, and not just with lip service, with their coin too. They're going to have to pivot. We can bring them on in. Kirk did it with the Kingdom Tour. He did it. Introduced that audience, and now they're familiar with one of the greatest gospel music artists of all time. And so the pivot can't always come at the expense of the African expression. I hope that you loved today's episode. And as always, the last thing that I'm going to do is pray for you. I love you, mean it. And until next time, take care.